Thank you to the clerks. Oh, my favorite report coming up, CR 22-125. Jumpstart donation and namings rights. Deputy Mayor Hawkins, can you introduce this report?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a recommendation from the Executive Committee that City Council delegate authority to the Executive Director, City Planning and Community Development or a designate to negotiate and approve a donation and naming rights agreement between the City of Regina and Canadian Tire Jumpstart regarding the donation as further described in this report, etc. Tiny bit of background to this. First of all, it should be said that Canadian Tire has a program which very generously builds playgrounds and other such facilities, especially that are accessible, and they're to be commended to that, and we're fortunate to have their offer as a donation. In October of 2021, an agreement was reached which would have cited that new facility, an accessible playground and spray pad at the Sportsplex. It was imagined at that time that a new aquatic center would be well in development. Those timelines have not, it's become evident, will not take place. That center will not be developed that quickly. And the administration went back to Canadian Tire to see how they would like to handle this. Canadian Tire indicated they would prefer to go ahead with this for 2023, and on that basis, administration further negotiated, and they are recommending a Glencairn neighborhood as a site for the center. What they're doing here with this in this motion is asking for permission to amend the agreement to make those changes. I think, Mayor, through you, it'd be worthwhile to have the administration explain this in a little more detail and explain the selection of the Glencairn site. Oh, and I'll need a seconder, Mayor, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Ms. Anderson, who goes on this one? Ms. Bryden.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Masters. First off, I would like to acknowledge and apologize for some confusing language that's used in the report, in particular on page 3, which should have been more clear and should not have tied the change in location of this facility to the Catalyst Committee. And we greatly appreciate the work of the Catalyst Committee as they consider the strategic locations of some very important projects in our community. This, on the other hand, is a really good news story. Canadian Jumpstart still wants to invest in a spray pad and play structure in our community. Canadian Tire has indicated that they prefer to move forward in 2023. And as we were working through the process of different opportunities, different sites, the best site that we could find and that they agreed to was the site at Glencairn. Jumpstart does these projects to ensure that these playgrounds become standard for inclusivity by creating imaginative and inclusive spaces where children can share in the magic of play. Some of their requirements are accessible parking, accessible washrooms, and they like to choose communities with high needs. The location at Glencairn, the playground in Glencairn in particular is older. We can't get some parts for it. They do not have accessible ramp structure. There is accessible washrooms available at the Glencairn Centre, off-street accessible parking. We can build the area within our existing budget. There is some cost to the city. There are approximately 80,000 visitors to that centre every year, and a large population of approximately 2,500 kids under the age of 14 in the area that this will serve. With that, we'd be happy to answer any more questions you might have.
Anything further, Councillor Hawkins?
Nothing further from me, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bresciani.
Very much. Just in regards to the site selection, the spray pad is talked about. I see 2 spray pads already, one in Parkridge and one in Glen Elm. Why a 3rd spray pad within this area then? Or is that going to be the one that's refurbished? I'm a little bit confused there.
So there is no spray pad at the Glencairn Community Centre. Through the Recreation Master Plan, part of our goal was to focus on quality versus quantity. So what we heard from residents was they would like some higher quality parks and spray pads, and so this will be one of those higher quality parks and spray pads. Further, we like to group our amenities, so having the accessible washroom in place at Glencairn is also not only a requirement of Jumpstart, but it is where we would like to continue to move in terms of our facilities. With response to other spray pads in the east, Ms. Shaley, would you like to speak to that one?
So we have a number of really small spray pads throughout the city that were built many, many years ago. They offer very little in terms of play value relative to the kinds of spray pads and playgrounds we build today, and most of them aren't accessible. And so when we're looking to distribute these kinds of facilities throughout the city, we're looking for opportunities to build something much bigger, a lot more play amenities at the site, something that is accessible to children and families experiencing different types of disabilities. And so this is really going to fill a gap within that area. Similar to many other areas in the city, the smaller spray pads that exist there today aren't the type of facility that we're talking about right now. So when staff did the assessment, they did assess that this is an area that is in need of this kind of facility. As Ms. Bryden had mentioned, we're really excited about the opportunity to have this kind of facility adjacent to the Glencairn, where we offer teen programs, children's programs, we've offered play escapes, and so there really are lots of synergies. There's also 2 schools at the site, so we're quite excited to be able to serve that community.
So I guess the last question is, when we look at the growth areas of the cities and the population density and the affordable housing that has gone into mostly Harbour Landing and the Greens on Gardner, when we look at those and the density of the families there, so how did that weigh out as population and new schools, the whole thing that you're talking about, or was this deemed to be because that would be again into the lower income areas as well, but was it deemed to refurbish old play structures to be more accessible?
So thank you, through you, Mayor Masters. Sorry. So most of the play structures in the east are newer. We work with the developers to install new and accessible or play areas. There's also more parks coming online out there that will offer more amenities in the newer development areas. I don't know that Jumpstart had there's no requirement to replace existing old playgrounds. This was an opportunity to add some amenities to an area where the playground is old and we're having trouble replacing parts and making it more accessible.
Okay, thank you. I'll just make a comment. I support this going there. I know that there's also higher density in that area, but it's also an area of a lot of newcomers. that live in that neighborhood as well that will benefit from it. So, but I would have appreciated a little bit more of the analysis in here as to why that location was chosen. It was not really in the report. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Stevens.
Chair, I'll go back to page 3 of the report. I know it's been stated that you apologize, administration, for including it. But what I would ask is it objectively true or false? It confirms what I've been told by many, is that the Catalyst Prod Committee did indeed disrupt work. Is this a symptom of that, or is this an objectively incorrect statement?
Through you, Mayor Masters, this isn't a correct statement. The Indoor Aquatic Centre is not going to be constructed in the timeline that was acceptable to Jumpstart. They wanted construction in the spring of 2023.
And that would not have been possible. So one way or the other, this pool was not going to be constructed in North Central, even though we had applied for the money, we received the money for this specific initiative. Something completely unrelated to the Catalyst Committee disrupted that work plan?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'm not sure about the planning for the Indoor Aquatic Centre prior to. Ms. Shaley, can you speak to that?
Through you, Mayor Masters, the planning for the Aquatic Centre has been on track. We've been working with very tight timelines that requires everything to fall in place in specific timelines, and because we don't have a location for the facility at this point in time, we're unable to start the site preparation work for the facility.
Okay, thank you. I recognize this is money that just, appeared that we weren't really accounting for, which is great. Does it free up in our capital planning for recreation amenities funds that we can now redeploy somewhere else? I'm selfishly thinking of North Central. I represent that community. Socioeconomically, it's very inviting. I need a tetanus shot to use the spray pad and the swing set on Pasqua. Seems like there's many opportunities for investment. Could this free up comparable resources that we could then build in other parts of the city where there's need?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll start. Ms. Shaley might add and speak directly to the capital plan, but there is acknowledgement that regardless of the location of the new Indoor Aquatic Centre, there will need to be an analysis and some work done in order to provide some outside amenities, particularly likely a play park. I don't know if that'll include a spray pad or not, but certainly that would come into play. And regardless of where the Indoor Aquatic Centre goes. In regards to the capital budget, I'll let Ms. Shaley speak to that.
Through the chair, through you, Mayor Masters. So these kinds of facilities are of interest to a lot of people within our community, and so for a few years now we've been actively including them in our long-term plans. Just to give you some examples, you'll recall we just opened a very large spray pad and playground just on the border between Coronation Park and North Central this past summer at the former Regent Par 3 site. We're currently working to develop a similar site at the current site of the Imperial School on North Broad Street. We're going to be opening a new one at Wascana Pool. As was mentioned earlier, we're working with developers on opportunities, and then we have another placeholder in our 2029 Recreation Culture Capital Program to add another one of these kinds of facilities to the community. So we are continuing to look for these kinds of opportunities. As Ms. Bryden mentioned, the site of the Sportplex, we are continuing to do some site planning regardless of where the Indoor Aquatic Centre goes, and so there are further conversations that will take place at that site. When we're looking for sites for these kinds of facilities, we do need some fairly large spaces. We are looking for sites where is access to bathroom facilities and parking. So those are really important criteria when we're trying to identify where we're going to build them.
Thank you. So final question, let's say, you know, I respected the first decision in the site planning. As Councillor Bresciani points out, there's plenty of places in need. I don't want to pit neighborhood against neighborhood. You know, if I develop criteria, I could probably do so, but let's say I wanted it to go north central right now. What would prohibit that from happening? Let's say I wanted it to go near where there may or may not be an aquatic facility. Why would that technically not be possible right now?
Through you, Mayor Masters. So we did look at all of the parks within North Central. We started by looking for those parks that have available, accessible bathroom facilities, and we identified two. One was at Mamawayatatin Centre, one was at Buffalo Meadows. The size of those two parks is not adequate for the size of the facility that we're looking at. We know that the community is interested in Grassic Park. In order to put this kind of facility in Grassic Park, we would have to build additional washroom facilities. We also kept in mind that the last facility that we built is less than a kilometer away, which is the one at the Region Par 3 site. So given our desire to distribute these kinds of facilities throughout the community, we did, through the analysis, identify the one at Glencairn as the best opportunity. It already has all the amenities that are required to make the site successful.
Great, thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Stevens. Councillor Findura.
Thank you, Mayor. It's kind of nice to hear we're talking about Glencairn. Discussing things with the Glencairn Community Association, DECA, they've been asking for several years, or as the administration noted, plate structures are old, they're broken. You're talking about tetanus shots, as Councillor Stevens mentioned, you can get some things for that. You can injure yourself, and we have, as the census 2016 shows 2,475 children that are under 14 in the area. And you have elementary school right next door to recreation facility. You have elementary school not very far from this. So you have about 6 elementary schools in the area. I would say, yeah, we can build things in just about any way we would like to. And second thing I would like to say is that congratulations and thank you to the Canadian Tire for Jumpstart to having that foresight of seeing the need for facilities like this, because city itself, I mean, I remember fundraising for 2 facilities in the east. And there were other clubs that fundraised to put in a tiny little spray pad, a rubber floor for swings and all that. We did that. I mean, the community has not just stopped living. So this is a good news for Glencairn, for the east side on recreation. Glencairn recreation facility is the only one in that area with, yeah, there's a small spray pad, but that's all there is there. And the city and the Canadian Tire having the vision to look at the need. And yes, of course, as we're moving forward, going elsewhere, there'll be a chance to invest in other areas. So we're not here to pin against each other here or areas of the city. Just be helpful and be grateful and be happy that certain area is getting it, embrace it. Kids will be very happy to see that. And we don't, yeah, maybe we have money from this, say, set aside to put something else. So, Glencairn thanks you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Findura. Councillor Nelson.
So just to fill me in for some information, because I know when we first talked about this, I'd mentioned my Uplands people don't have a spray pad, so we don't even have to get a tetanus shot. I know, I just had to play with that. Anyways, can you tell me, so I can tell my residents, why we never were considered or why it never was brought to the table that possibly Uplands, since we don't have a facility up there, we have a lot of children, I don't know how many numbers, but we don't have a spray pad, why that area wasn't deemed to be appropriate for the build, through the chair.
So thank you, through you, Mayor Masters. Again, I'll highlight that, as Ms. Shaley indicated earlier, these types of structures require quite a large space. And Canadian Tire Jumpstart's a requirement that there be accessible parking and washrooms available at the site. So in terms of development in your area, I'll actually refer that to Ms. Shaley for her comments in relation to the facilities up there.
Through you, Mayor Masters, staff did look at Uplands as a part of their review. The only site that had the accessible washrooms that was identified was at Mount Pleasant. There's quite a lot of activity at Mount Pleasant right now, and we're undertaking some site planning there. And so because of the other work that's underway, regarding the future site planning of Mount Pleasant, it wasn't identified as the best opportunity for this infrastructure.
So moving forward, because I mean, we're getting a lot more development up in that area now with Kensington building and growing. What does Uplands, what do I need to do for Uplands to get anything up there? Through the chair.
Through you, Mayor Masters, so we are doing some work on a site plan for the Mount Pleasant area. That's our focus right now. We are working on a design for a facility that would provide supports for the many amenities that already exist up there. You know, we have the ball diamonds, and we just built a dog park there, and we have tennis courts that we're working on, and there's a toboggan hill, so there's a number of amenities up in Uplands at Mount Pleasant. Our focus right now is on doing some site planning and preparing, because we do have funding in the capital budget to provide a support facility that will better serve all of those amenities. So right now, that's the priority up there. As I said earlier, we are continuing to include these kinds of spray pad and playground amenities in our capital program, and so you'll continue to see those kinds of amenities as we move forward with future years of planning.
So with Mount Pleasant, I know you guys are planning on building a building to keep all the things and stuff like that, but my kids up there don't have a spray pad and they don't have a playground. So just let that be known. It's just really sad for the kids up there. They don't have anything like that, but we'll continue to work together and hopefully get something in the near future. Thank you.
As I said earlier, we are currently building a spray pad and playground at the Imperial site, which is relatively close to Uplands. This is a pretty significant investment in that area as well. And so, as I said earlier, we are trying to provide adequate coverage with these kinds of facilities throughout the city.
Okay, I just don't know too many kids are going to walk over the bridge, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Stadnichuk.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Through the chair, when we first heard about the Canadian Tire Jumpstart donation, it was when it came to council. I would like to know why Canadian Tire selected Regina and if they had a particular interest in North Central when they made this donation or proposed this donation.
Through you, Mayor Masters. So Canadian Tire Jumpstart is an organization that's invested in creating opportunities for children and youth to be active. And as part of our COVID recovery efforts, administration, along with a local program called Growing Young Movers, was successful in securing some funding from Jumpstart to deliver after-school and leadership programming at Mama-Waiatatin Centre, as well as other city recreation centers, including Core Ritchie and Glencairn. So while we were working on that initiative, Jumpstart indicated to city staff their interest in partnering on a recreation infrastructure project that would focus on accessibility for children with disabilities, to provide more opportunity for families. And through further dialogue between Jumpstart and city staff, and with the thought of the new indoor aquatic centre, that's really how that original site was chosen.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, I just was curious because someone had indicated that, someone who lives in North Central had indicated that they were associating the donation specific to North Central because Canadian Tire wanted to work on Indigenous issues after they lost a human rights complaint in 2017. So I just wanted to clarify whether or not that was the case.
Thank you. Through your Mayor Masters, we are certainly not aware. They certainly have not indicated that to us.
Okay. All right. I will be supporting this, and I do hope that we can continue to invest in North Central. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Councillor Zachidniak.
Thank you. So just to pick up on a question that Councillor Stadnichuk had just asked, because I had a similar one. What was so it sounds like Jumpstart themselves did not have a preference in terms of geographic location within the city for the location of this amenity. That's accurate, right?
Through you, Mayor Masters, that would be accurate.
So was there any sort of, their reaction to the change in plans? I'm just curious about that. What was their reaction to the need to discuss a different location? Was there any major concern on their part?
Through you, Mayor Masters, no, Jumpstart they are happy to be helping to create a new location in Regina for an accessible and inclusive location in Regina, and certainly happy to look at a different location. They would like to see the project underway.
Okay. And then perhaps this was already touched on, my apologies if I missed it, but is there still then a demand for these amenities within the area around the Sportplex, and what will be done to address that demand in the future?
I believe it was asked and answered already in terms of outdoor play space being created for whatever facility is structured there. Ms. Bryan, do you have anything further to answer?
I do not.
Thank you.
Okay, and question about the budget. So what it states on page 2 is that originally the cost would be included in the IAF budget, and as a result of the new location, there will be a need for a capital budget of $450,000, which is referred to the 2023 budget process. For my clarification, is that just a matter of transferring funds from the IAF budget to this new proposed location, or is this new funding that is needed?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I believe this is new funding that's been allocated within our recreation projects, but I'll refer that one to Ms. Shaley.
Through you, Mayor Masters, that's accurate. We have an annual playgrounds budget, and so that budget will be used to pay for this. Through the indoor aquatics budget, we will use funding from that to build a similar type of outdoor amenity wherever the indoor aquatic center is located.
And so what was, so this $450,000 is from the annual playground budget. What was originally going to be, what was that budget originally going to be used for if we hadn't needed to come up with a new location for this?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'm going to ask Ms. Zachidniak to answer that question.
Through you, Mayor Masters, that annual playgrounds budget is used to replace neighborhood playgrounds that might have a lower play value or may need to look at being replaced for other reasons, and so it would have been used to replace one of the playgrounds that's already in our system of playgrounds.
So do you have further information about which one is now going to have deferred replacement as a result of this change, just to have full information about the implication?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I don't have that with me right now. That's something that we would work on in conjunction with facilities when we do our capital planning for the year to ensure that if they are doing updates or have to do some renewal at another spray pad location for one of our spray pads, then we would work in conjunction with them to update the playground at the same time so that we don't have to take the sites down at different times for different projects. And so I don't have that information with me right now.
Okay. So I do have a comment that I was surprised to hear an apology in relation to the mention of the Catalyst Committee. I didn't see anything in the report that was inaccurate in terms of what has led to the need to reconsider the location for this project, and so I don't think any apology was needed, and I see no inaccuracies in the report. That's all I have at this time.
Seeing no further questions, I got a couple. Ms. Shaley, your mic's going to be turned on. So, objectively inaccurate, Ms. Bryden. Thanks for the acknowledgement of that. And then I believe Ms. Shaley said that there's no location for siting. So this is fascinating to me. Tell me about the sites that administration looked at when it came to siting for the pool. Tell me about the options that were considered. Mr. Lacey, Ms. Bryden, I'll take anybody on this one.
Through you, Mayor Masters, the initial focus of the design work was around where the existing location of the Lawson is. As that design work continued, we also looked at doing some work as well with respect to the yards.
And so the analysis on all of that?
And that information was presented to Council back in July when we brought forward the preliminary design work, feasibility work, as well as preliminary costing of what that pool is estimated to cost.
Right, so tell me about the feasibility on the yards. You did work on it, so tell me about the feasibility of locating on the yards.
Through you, Mayor Masters, you know, I think the feasibility of both locations are similar with respect to the ability to build the infrastructure on those two pieces of land.
Both exist? So tell me about the work and the analysis that was done in terms of the opportunity for development around an aquatic center regardless of where it went.
So through you, Mayor Masters, just for clarification, I think you're referring to whether opportunities might present themselves depending on the location of where you build the indoor
No, I'm
aquatic
actually
facility?
talking about the analysis that administration did on the opportunities that could be predicted based upon site location.
No, through you, Mayor Masters, through the work that was undertaken by administration, there was not focus on that aspect of the feasibility review.
Can you put shovels in the ground in April? If you got a site right now?
Through you, Mayor Masters, no, there needs to be detailed design. That will probably take upwards to a year to 18 months once we return to council and seek, formal approval. Project funding for it is not in place as well. Council might recall we're going forward with a grant application and to the investment ICIP as well. There's a municipal portion as well that we would have to return to council and receive formal approval on.
When do you expect to bring the funding request back to council?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I would anticipate that well, part of this, I think, will be dependent on so part of this will be dependent on the timing of our ICIP application process, and I think the outcome overall of the work of the Catalyst Committee and the timing and the phasing of the projects to best move forward with these key projects for the city. So I do expect that will be sometime in the upcoming year. I'm hopeful that we'll get some clarity around that piece and be able to bring that forward to City Council.
So how did we originally think we were putting a spray pad at the Aquatic Centre in 2023?
Through you, Mayor Masters, I'll refer that question to Ms. Shannon.
Through you, Mayor Masters, Ms. Derdich is actually going to provide an answer.
So through you, Mayor Masters, when the project was first imagined with Canadian Tire Jumpstart for the Sportplex site, as Mr. Lacey indicated, our planning had concentrated on the Sportplex site as the new location for the indoor aquatic facility. So our timing was such that we would be far enough along in schematic design that we would be able to site the Canadian Tire Jumpstart project and then construct the indoor aquatic facility at a later date, which we had discussed with Canadian Tire Jumpstart at the time.
I'm going to go back to how could you decide to put it there if you hadn't actually recommended to council that it go there, the Aquatic Centre itself go there? I'm confused.
Through you, Mayor. Go ahead.
No, I think through you, Mayor Masters, initially the work, as has been stated here, was focused on the existing site of the Lawson. And I think at the time, when there were conversations with Jumpstart, the hope was that the indoor aquatics, the advancement of the indoor aquatics facility would be at a different place than where it's currently at. That may have been optimistic when those Jumpstart conversations were happening, but the fact of the matter is that there was, I guess, an initial focus on the pool being around the Lawson site. Like I say, that planning changed later with respect to looking at another option. Final determination has not happened yet.
Okay, I'm going to be confused again. Did we look at more than one site to start with, or did we look at more than one site afterwards? Before the Catalyst Committee?
With respect to?
Well, apparently in July, we got reporting in that we were looking at the yards, and so initially, were we looking at alternate sites for the Aquatic Centre, or was it just one?
Initially, our focus was solely around the Lawson site. That's where the initial work started, yes.
And so in the absence of funding, how do we determine where a spray pad goes and an aquatic centre goes? We don't have funding approved.
I think at the time when the planning was being undertaken, we were hopeful that we'd be further along and the timing of the two would come together. I think clearly we're here today knowing that that was a false assumption and that we need to now look at a different site.
Ms. Shaley stated that planning continues according to schedule. We had $3.2 million in the budget for 2022. Has that been spent?
So through you, Mayor Masters, so to get to a point where we can make a application to, for ICIP funds, which is in March, there is further planning that needs to happen to ensure that we have an application that will qualify for review. Part of that work that needs to be completed, to complete that piece, is to know where the location of the pool is. There is some preliminary work that can be done around design work, but sometime in the new year we do expect Council will get recommendations from the Catalyst Committee that will allow us then to kind of finalize that work to be able to make the ICIP application timelines. But we will need to know the location before we can make the application.
Agreed. Councillor Hawkins, did you wish to close off debate?
I'm nothing further, thank you.
Thank you very much. Clerk, can you please call the vote?
Mayor Masters, the motion is carried 10-1 with all members present voting in favor.